The federal government just did something you almost never see in gun cases. The Department of Justice is openly arguing that assault weapon bans violate the Second Amendment. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed? Because what I'm about to reveal could save you from a decade in prison. Hit that button now. Let's slow down and make this simple, because the headlines are loud and the details are where people get hurt. This story is about a major Illinois case, plus a bigger national shift that most gun owners still haven't connected yet. Here's what just happened. Illinois passed a law called the Protect Illinois Communities Act. People call it PICA. It bans a long list of firearms the state labels assault weapons. It also bans certain magazines over certain capacities. And here's the part that matters to your everyday life. This type of law is not just about what gun you own. It's also about dates, definitions, and paperwork. That's where regular people can get trapped. A federal judge in southern Illinois ruled the Illinois ban was unconstitutional and blocked enforcement after a full trial. Now, that alone is huge, but the next part is what made this breaking news. The U.S. Department of Justice stepped in on the side of the challengers. Not quietly, not with a vague statement. DOJ filed a friend of the court brief in the appeals court. That's an amicus brief. In plain English, it means DOJ told the court, we support the people challenging this law. If you followed gun lawsuits for any amount of time, you know how unusual that is. Because DOJ doesn't usually show up to help gun owners in a state ban case, so when the federal government takes a position like this, you should pay attention. Now, I want to make sure you understand exactly what DOJ backs it means. It does not mean the ban is gone nationwide overnight. It does not mean you can ignore your state law. It means DOJ is taking a clear side in court and pushing a specific constitutional argument. And the argument is simple enough for anybody to understand. DOJ is saying you can't ban firearms that are commonly owned by law-abiding people for lawful purposes. That commonly owned idea is one of the biggest battlegrounds in Second Amendment cases right now. Let me explain common use with an everyday example. If a tool is owned by millions of normal people, used for lawful reasons, and sold legally across most of the country, courts have treated it differently than a rare weapon almost nobody has. DOJ's position is that AR-15 style rifles are common, not rare, not strange, not some exotic item, common. And DOJ also argues magazines used with those rifles are common too. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't just a policy debate. This is about how courts are supposed to apply the Supreme Court's modern Second Amendment test. That test focuses heavily on the text of the Second Amendment and the history of gun regulation in America. So the fight is not, do we like this law? The fight is this the type of law the Constitution allows? Now I'm going to break the rest of this down into clear parts so you can track it. First thing you need to know is how court decisions actually work. Most people think a court decision is like flipping a light switch. On, off, done. But gun cases are not like that. They move in stages. A district court judge rules. Then an appeals court reviews it. Then sometimes the Supreme Court gets involved. And in the middle of all that, there can be temporary court orders that change what is enforceable right now. This is why you can hear the ban was struck down, and then find out your state is still enforcing parts of it. It's confusing on purpose, or at least it feels that way. And confusion is dangerous when the penalty is felony charges. Here's the mistake I see all the time. A gun owner sees a headline. They don't read past the headline. They assume they're safe. Then they do something that was illegal yesterday, thinking it's legal today when it might not be. Or they do something legal today, but the rules change next month. That's why you have to follow the details. Because court fights don't just decide rights. They also create chaos while the system argues with itself. Second thing you need to know is what these bans really ban. A lot of people hear assault weapon ban and think it's a list of a few guns. No, these laws usually work like a net. They ban by name and they ban by features. They might ban a firearm if it has a detachable magazine plus certain parts, a certain stock, a certain grip, a handguard, a flash hider. Small parts that most normal people don't see as dangerous can change the legal category. That's why two rifles can look nearly identical, but one is legal and one is not, depending on local rules. And that's why normal people can get jammed up, because you can be trying to follow the law and still miss a detail. Now, before we go deeper, let's make this personal. Imagine you're you. You have a job, you have a family, you have responsibilities. You're not sitting around reading court filings all day. You hear on social media that a judge ended the ban, so you relax. Maybe you buy a part, maybe you buy a magazine, maybe you take something across a state line, maybe you loan something to a family member. Then you find out the rules never really changed the way you thought they did, and now you're exposed. That is not a scare tactic. That is real life when laws are complex and penalties are high. Third thing you need to know is what DOJ is actually arguing. DOJ is not just saying this law is harsh. It is saying a total ban on a class of commonly owned firearms violates the Second Amendment. That is a big difference, because that argument, if adopted widely, can put many bans on very shaky ground. DOJ also argues that lawmakers can't just call something militaristic and ban it. This matters because politicians love labels. They love phrases that make something sound terrifying. But the Constitution does not run on vibes. Courts are supposed to use tests. DOJ's point is basically the label is not the test. And that's important because so much of the public debate has been built on branding. Now, here's the part nobody's talking about. DOJ isn't only filing briefs. It's also filing lawsuits in other places that target similar restrictions. For example, DOJ has moved against Washington, D.C. over policies tied to banning or blocking registration of certain semi-auto rifles. That means DOJ is not just commenting, it's acting. And when you see DOJ do both things at once, it tells you there is a coordinated legal direction. So when people say, this could end assault weapon bans, that's why they believe it. Not because the whole country changed in one day, but because the momentum and the legal posture are shifting in a way we have not seen in a long time. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about the 5 words that protect you when cops ask about your gun. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Now let's talk about the real-world consequences, because this is where people need to wake up. When bans are in place, the risks are not theoretical. Here are 3 scenarios that happen to normal people. Scenario 1 is the traffic stop. You're driving home, range bag, case in the trunk, everything locked up. You get pulled over for speeding or a broken light. The officer sees the case. Now you're in a situation where a simple question becomes loaded. Is that firearm legal here? Most people think the answer is simple, but in ban states, the answer can depend on the model, the features, the magazine, the purchase date, and whether a registration system exists. And it can also depend on what the courts are doing this month. If you don't know that, you can talk yourself into trouble. Not because you did something evil, but because you didn't understand the shifting legal ground. Scenario 2 is the moving problem. People move all the time. You move from one county to another, or one state to another. You bring your property with you. But gun laws don't travel nicely. A normal magazine in one state can be illegal in another. A rifle configuration that is boring and normal in one place can become a felony problem in another, and people don't always figure that out before the moving truck arrives. Scenario 3 is the inheritance trap. A parent passes away. A family member gives you a rifle or magazines. You accept them. You assume it's all fine because they were owned for years. But some ban laws don't care how long you've owned it. They care whether it's registered, whether transfers are allowed, and whether your possession fits inside the rules. If you don't know that, you can step into a legal minefield during one of the hardest moments of your life. Now, quick legal note, this is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. Now let's zoom out and talk about why DOJ stepping in matters to the courts. Judges notice when the United States government speaks, even if a judge disagrees, the judge will treat it seriously. Because DOJ is not a random commentator. It's the federal government filing a legal position in a federal court. That matters for 2 reasons. First, it can influence how the court frames the issue. Instead of, is this law a good idea? The court is pushed toward, is this law allowed under the Second Amendment? Second, it can influence future cases. Lawyers in other states can cite the DOJ position as persuasive authority. That doesn't mean it automatically wins, but it gives weight to the argument. And if you're wondering, can DOJs really do that? The answer is yes. DOJ can choose to file briefs, DOJ can choose to bring lawsuits, and DOJ can choose to argue for a certain interpretation of the Constitution. Now, let's address one of the biggest misunderstandings online. People say, if a judge struck it down, it's over. No, even when a judge issues a permanent injunction, the state can appeal, and during that appeal, the state might ask for the injunction to be paused. So it's possible for a judge to say, stop enforcing, and yet enforcement continues temporarily while higher courts decide. That's why this is not something you can treat casually. This is not a meme. This is not a slogan. This is your life and your freedom. Now, let's talk about the most controversial part, the AR-15 itself. I'm not here to argue politics with you. I'm here to keep you informed on the law. The AR-15 is at the center of many of these cases because it's common, it's widely owned. It's often used for lawful purposes like training, sport shooting, and defense. That common fact is what makes it legally important. Because the Supreme Court has repeatedly focused on whether arms are commonly possessed by law-abiding citizens. So when a state bans something that large numbers of lawful citizens own, it triggers the core fight. That's what DOJ is leaning into. Now let's talk about the magazine part, because this is where I think many people underestimate the danger. Many semi-auto firearms are designed around standard magazines. When lawmakers set a low capacity limit, they're not just limiting extra ammo, they're changing how the firearm is normally used. Whether you agree with that politically or not, that becomes part of the legal argument. And it becomes part of the practical risk. Because magazines are easy to forget. They're easy to leave in a bag. They're easy to lend. They're easy to bring along without thinking. And that's why magazine bans are one of the most common ways normal people end up on the wrong side of the law. Now, here's a hard truth. Even if the law is wrong, you can still get arrested under it. Being right later does not undo the damage today. Legal fees, court dates, job issues, public records. That's why staying informed matters. It's not about winning debates. It's about not becoming the example story. Now I want to give you a clean, simple way to think about this story. Think of it as 3 layers. Layer 1 is Illinois. A federal judge ruled against the ban after trial. The case is in the appeals process. DOJ filed support for the challengers in the appeals court. Layer 2 is the broader federal posture. DOJ is not only filing briefs, but also taking action against restrictive jurisdictions in other ways. Layer 3 is the national trend. If more courts adopt the common use approach in the same way, broad bans become harder to defend. None of those layers means everything is legal everywhere, but together they show why this moment matters. Now I want to talk about timing because everybody wants a calendar. Tell me when it changes. I can't promise a date. Court timelines shift, but I can tell you what to watch. Watch for major appellate decisions. Watch for whether courts allow bans to be enforced during the appeal. Watch for Supreme Court activity because even a denial, even a comment from a justice can signal future moves. Also watch for lawmakers reacting. Because sometimes states try to rewrite bans in new forms to survive the next legal hit. That's important because many people think if they lose, they'll stop. Often they don't. They adapt. They change language. They shift categories. They target parts instead of guns. They lower thresholds. They expand definitions. That's why you can't treat one court win as permanent safety. Now, here's what I want you to do with this information in a careful and responsible way. First, don't act based on excitement. Act based on clarity. Second, if you live in a banned state, learn the exact rules that apply to you. Not to your friend in another county. Not to a guy on the internet. To you. Third, if you travel, check the rules before you travel, not after. Fourth, if you are unsure, talk to a qualified local attorney. Because the cost of a consultation is often far less than the cost of a mistake. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how fast people online jump from maybe to it's over? That's a human thing. We want certainty. We want the fight to be done. But the legal system is slow, and it is full of twists. So the smart move is to stay steady, stay informed, and stay cautious until things are final. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the 50,000 gun owners who get these updates first. Click subscribe. Now, I want to address one more big misunderstanding. A lot of people think this is only about buying new rifles. But bans and court decisions also affect possession, transport, transfers, repairs, parts, even how law enforcement handles contact with you. Because if a law is on the books, officers may treat it as valid unless told otherwise. And even if the law is in court trouble, you may still deal with the friction in real life. That's why knowledge is power here, not for internet arguing, for safety, for avoiding misunderstandings, for protecting your rights. Now, some of you are asking, if DOJ is supporting challengers, does that mean the federal government won't enforce anything against gun owners? No, and you need to hear that clearly. DOJ can support a position in one type of case and still prosecute other gun crimes. So don't confuse DOJ supports Second Amendment arguments here with there are no gun laws. There are still many laws. There are still many prosecutions. And the risk is still real. That's why the smartest gun owner is not the loudest one. It's the one who stays informed and calm. Now, before we close, let's circle back to the title. Court decision to end assault weapon bans. The honest version is this. A strong court decision against a ban, combined with DOJ openly supporting the challengers, increases the chances that future courts will strike down similar bans. It builds legal pressure. It builds momentum. It makes it harder for states to defend broad bans on common rifles and common magazines. But it does not instantly erase every ban today. So here's the best way to hold both truths at once. This is a major win in the fight. And it is also an ongoing fight. Now, let's talk about what could happen next in a way that doesn't overpromise. One possible path is the appeals court agrees with the challengers and keeps the injunction. Another possible path is the appeals court disagrees and allows enforcement. Another possible path is a mixed result. And after that, the Supreme Court might get involved or it might wait. So what you should do is treat this like a developing story with big stakes, not like a finished story. Now, I want to give you one last practical warning. Don't make the mistake of thinking nobody enforces these laws. Even if enforcement is rare, it can be selective, it can be uneven, it can show up during a stop, during a call for service, during a domestic dispute, during a neighbor complaint, during an unrelated investigation. And once law enforcement is looking, they may stack charges. So don't be the person who learns this the hard way. Stay within the law while the courts fight it out. And stay informed so you can protect yourself. This information could literally expire after January 2026. Subscribe now because the next video explains exactly what you need to do before that deadline hits. All right, here's the bottom line, in plain terms. A federal judge ruled against Illinois' assault weapon and magazine ban and blocked enforcement after trial. Then, the Department of Justice filed a brief supporting the challengers, arguing bans on commonly owned rifles and commonly owned magazines violate the Second Amendment. And DOJ has also taken action against similar restrictions in other places, which signals a broader shift. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Don't live off headlines. Live off verified updates. Because the price of being wrong here can be life-changing. If you want to stay ahead of these changes, subscribe right now. I do the digging so you don't have to. And I want you informed before a rule change puts you at risk. Final simple disclaimer, I'm not your lawyer, and this is not legal advice. This is general educational information. If you need guidance for your exact situation, talk to a qualified attorney in your state.